The little girl's tiny fingers trembled as she reached for her brother's hand. His skin was ice cold. His lips, once so full of laughter, were now an unnatural shade of blue. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. But there was no response. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, the way it always did after their mother baked. But beneath it, a more sinister scent lingered, something metallic, something wrong. Their mother, Allison Parker, stood frozen in the doorway, clutching the empty glass she had used to serve their bedtime drinks. Her face was blank, eerily calm, but her eyes held a storm of emotions too tangled to read. "Mom?" Emily's voice cracked as she looked up, pleading. "What's wrong with Daniel?" Silence. A clock ticked on the wall, each second stretching into an eternity. Then, Allison took a step forward. A slow, deliberate step. "Mom?" Emily tried again, but her breath hitched as she saw her mother's fingers tighten around the empty glass. And then, in that stillness, Daniel's body convulsed. A horrible, gut-wrenching sound gurgled from his throat. His back arched violently before he collapsed onto the kitchen floor. Emily screamed. A week earlier, life in the Parker household had seemed almost perfect. Daniel was a bright, curious 10-year-old who loved baseball and comic books. Emily, just 8, adored art and spent hours drawing pictures of their family. Their father, Mark Parker, worked long hours at the construction site, but he always made time to kiss their foreheads before leaving in the morning. And Allison. Allison was the mother everyone admired. She baked fresh cookies for the school fundraiser. She volunteered at the library. She never raised her voice, never missed a school play, never forgot a birthday. But beneath the warmth of their home, something dark was stirring. It began with the phone calls late at night. Mark would wake up to find Allison sitting in the kitchen, whispering into the receiver. When he asked about it, she would smile, too wide, too forced, and tell him it was nothing. Then came the mood swings. One morning, she hugged the children so tight they squealed with laughter. That same evening, she locked herself in the bedroom for hours, refusing to come out even when Emily slid a drawing under the door. Mark chalked it up to stress. "She just needs some rest," he told himself. "She's been working so hard." But then, the small accidents started happening. Emily's favorite teddy bear disappeared. Daniel's baseball glove was found buried in the backyard. A shattered plate in the sink, though no one remembered breaking it. Mark started watching his wife more closely. And what he saw made his stomach twist. Allison wasn't sleeping. Shadows formed under her once bright eyes. She stopped calling her friends. Stopped baking. Stopped smiling. One night, Mark found her sitting in the dark, staring at the children's school photos on the fridge. "Allison," he murmured, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. She flinched. I just want to keep them safe," she whispered. Mark frowned. "Safe from what?" She didn't answer. But something in her eyes sent a chill down his spine. Then came the morning when Emily woke up feeling sick. "I don't feel good," she whimpered, clutching her stomach. Daniel had laughed, ruffling her hair. "You probably just ate too much candy." Allison, standing by the sink, stirred a glass of orange juice with slow, deliberate motions. "You need to stay home today," she said softly. Emily blinked. "But Mom, I have a spelling test." Allison turned to face her daughter, her expression unreadable. "Trust me, sweetie. It's better if you stay home." Mark had overheard and felt uneasy. But he brushed it off. After all, Moms knew best, right? Had he known then what was coming, he would have grabbed his children and never looked back. That night, Allison prepared hot cocoa. She called Daniel and Emily to the kitchen, her voice as gentle as always. "I made something special for you," she said, placing 2 mugs in front of them. Emily hesitated. "Go on," Allison urged with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Drink up." Daniel took a sip first. Then, Emily. For a moment, everything was fine. Then Daniel's body lurched. And Emily's world shattered. The kitchen was chaos. Emily's screams filled the air as she clutched her brother's convulsing body. His limbs jerked violently, his eyes rolled back, and froth bubbled at the corners of his mouth. "Daniel! Wake up! Please, wake up!" Allison stood motionless, her expression unreadable. Then, as if suddenly aware of what was happening, she dropped the glass in her hand. It shattered against the tiled floor. What's happening?" she gasped, her voice trembling. Mark burst into the room, drawn by the noise. His eyes went wide with horror as he took in the scene, Emily sobbing, Daniel twitching on the floor, Allison standing frozen in the middle of it all. What the hell is going on? Emily looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Daddy! Something's wrong with Daniel. He drank the cocoa and..." Mark's gaze snapped to the mugs on the table. He grabbed one and sniffed it. A bitter, chemical scent hit his nose. His stomach dropped. His head whipped toward Allison. "What did you put in this?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Mark didn't wait for an answer. He scooped Daniel into his arms and bolted for the door. "Emily, come on." Emily scrambled to her feet, but as she reached the doorway, Allison's fingers latched onto her wrist. "Wait," her mother pleaded. "You don't understand." "I was trying to." Mark spun around, his voice sharp as a knife. "Let her go, Allison." Tears welled in Allison's eyes. "You have to believe me, Mark. I was trying to protect them." Mark yanked Emily free and shot his wife a look of pure disbelief. Protect them? From what? But there was no time for answers. He rushed out the door, Emily close behind, and sped to the hospital, breaking every traffic law along the way. The emergency room was a blur of frantic doctors and blinding fluorescent lights. "Poisoning," Mark told them, his voice ragged. He was poisoned. They whisked Daniel away, hooking him up to machines, working desperately to stabilize him. Emily clung to her father's side, her tiny fingers gripping his shirt. "He's going to be okay, right, Daddy?" Mark swallowed hard. "I don't know, baby." The words felt like knives in his throat. Then, the police arrived. A tall officer with a sharp gaze stepped forward. "Mr. Parker, we need to ask you some questions." Mark's hands curled into fists. "It was my wife. She did something to the cocoa." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner before nodding. "Where is she now?" "At home. We need to bring her in for questioning." Mark hesitated. A part of him still couldn't wrap his head around it. Allison, his wife, the woman he had loved for 15 years, had poisoned their children. But why? As the officers left to find her, Mark slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Emily sat beside him, hugging her knees to her chest. "Mommy wouldn't hurt us," she whispered. Mark wished he could believe that. Back at the house, the police arrived to find the kitchen empty. The shattered glass was still on the floor. The half-drunk mugs of cocoa sat untouched. But Allison was nowhere to be found. The back door was open. A single set of footprints led away from the house into the darkness. She was gone. Hours passed in agonizing silence. Daniel was still unconscious. The doctors had flushed the poison from his system, but they couldn't say if there would be lasting effects. Mark sat by his son's bedside, gripping his tiny hand. Emily curled up in the chair beside them, refusing to leave. Then, the detective returned. "We searched the house," he said, his expression grim. "She's missing." Mark's blood turned to ice. "Missing?" "She ran. We found footprints leading into the woods behind your home. We're putting out an alert, but right now, we don't know where she is." Mark exhaled shakily. He didn't know what scared him more, the fact that his wife had poisoned their kids, or the fact that she was still out there. Emily spoke up, her voice small. "When Mommy left, did she take anything with her?" The detective hesitated. "Just her purse. Mark's mind raced. If she had run, she had a plan. But what kind of plan? Where was she going? And more importantly, would she come back? A cold dread settled in his stomach. Something told him this nightmare was far from over. The night stretched long and heavy inside the hospital. The hum of machines filled the room as Daniel lay unconscious, his tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Emily had drifted off in the chair beside him, her fingers still curled in her father's shirt. Mark sat motionless, staring at his son. He couldn't wrap his mind around it. The woman he had built a life with, the woman who had kissed their children goodnight for years, had done this. And now, she was out there. Somewhere. His thoughts were interrupted by the sharp chime of his phone. He snatched it up, his heart pounding as he saw the caller ID, Detective Harris. He answered immediately. "Did you find her?" "We might have a lead," the detective replied. "Your wife's credit card was just used at a gas station about 40 miles from here. Security footage shows she was alone." Mark's jaw tightened. "Did she say anything?" The detective hesitated. The cashier reported that she seemed frantic. Kept glancing over her shoulder. She bought bottled water, energy bars, and a prepaid phone. Then she left. Mark gripped his phone tighter. "She's running." "Looks that way," Harris said. "We've sent officers in that direction, but there's something else you need to know." Mark braced himself. "What?" "She left something at the counter by accident. A folded-up note." Mark's stomach twisted. "What did it say?" The detective exhaled. "It just said one thing: I had no choice." A cold shiver ran through Mark's body. "No choice?" His grip tightened around the phone. "That's not good enough. I need to know why. Why would she do this to our kids?" "We're trying to find her, Mr. Parker," the detective said. "And when we do, we'll get answers." The call ended, but Mark's mind was spinning. His wife had poisoned their children and vanished into the night, leaving behind nothing but an excuse. He looked at Daniel, then at Emily, who stirred in her sleep. "No choice?" He clenched his fists. "No. There was always a choice." The next morning, Daniel woke up. His eyelids fluttered, and he let out a weak, raspy breath. "Daddy?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Mark nearly collapsed with relief. "Hey, buddy. I'm right here." Daniel blinked in confusion. What happened?" Emily bolted upright, her tired eyes instantly filling with tears. "Danny." She wrapped her arms around him, careful not to hurt him. "You scared me." Mark swallowed hard, brushing his hand through his son's hair. "You got sick, champ. But you're going to be okay." Daniel frowned, his small face scrunching in thought. "I remember drinking my cocoa, and then my stomach started to hurt. Mommy was there." Emily stiffened. "She gave us the cocoa." Daniel's lips trembled. "Where is she?" Mark hesitated. "She's not here right now." Daniel stared at him, then turned to his sister. "Did I do something wrong?" Mark's chest tightened. "No, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong." Daniel's little hands gripped the hospital blanket. "Then why would Mommy hurt us?" Mark had no answer. Hours later, another call came in. Mark snatched up his phone, bracing himself. "Detective? We found her." Mark's pulse pounded in his ears. "Where?" "She was spotted at an old motel on the outskirts of town. Our officers moved in, but when they knocked on her door, she was already gone." Mark cursed under his breath. "So she got away again?" The detective sighed. "Not completely. She left something behind, a notebook. It was open on the bed. And, Mark, you need to see what's inside." Mark's throat tightened. "What is it?" The detective's voice dropped. "Her reasons." A heavy silence stretched between them before the detective spoke again. I'm sending a squad car to pick you up. You need to see this for yourself. Mark's grip on the phone tightened. I'll be ready. As he hung up, dread settled in his gut. For the past 24 hours, he had been asking why. Now, he was finally going to get the answer. But something told him he wasn't going to like it.